And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby 411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is the MLR Power Rankings for Week 13. 13 weeks down, just 5 more weeks to go. We are heading deep into the playoff competition. We have very few precious playoff spots left, and still quite a few teams fighting for those spots. I think the Eastern Conference is a little bit wrapped up right now, but still the difference between placing second or third means that you can host one of the playoff games. And as we've learned in MLR rugby, home field advantage is still very, very important. I'll be that 1 week where every away team won. Statistics still go into the favor of the home team, so there is still a lot to play for. And in the West, there are a lot of teams fighting for those playoff spots. But these power rankings have really nothing to do with the standings or the tables for the Eastern Western Conference. If you're new to these videos, this is all about my perception of what team was the best team the week of MLR action. It is also based on who you are playing, everything that occurs on the pitch, what you've done recently compared to what you did at the beginning of the season, where things like your standings do take into account overall record. This is really about the here and now. So you will have teams who start off way hot at the beginning of the season, now are faltering down into the lower half of the power rankings, while teams that were struggling to get their way to the top are now finally making their way again as we have our final push towards the MLR playoffs. So let's begin. We will start with, the usual team at the number 13 spot. By the way, a little spoiler, there is a new number 1 team. So we'll see exactly who that is. But unfortunately, the number 13 team, really no surprise. It's the Dallas Jackals. And sadly, I feel that is probably not going to change for the rest of the season. Again, my second favorite team, a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries, a lot of things that have just not gone the way of the Dallas Jackals, and I don't feel this season's going to get, like I said, any easier as we go into the last 5 weeks of the 2022 season. Dallas suffered another huge loss this time to the San Diego Legion, 53-14 at Choctaw Stadium. Unfortunately for the Dallas Jackals, home field advantage means very little for them. They are still stuck at number 13. Number 12, once again, NOLA Gold. NOLA Gold, though, actually had a pretty good performance against Rugby New York, one of the more top teams, especially in the Eastern Conference, one of the 3 teams that I feel have pretty much locked up the 3 playoff spots. After being down 31-7, NOLA Gold came back with 21 unanswered points. I've been very, very critical of their scrum half, Damian Stevens, who has pretty much been the fly half, Damian Stevens, who's pretty much had the fly half position after Carl Myers has gone out with an injury. It looks like it might be a season-ending injury, unfortunately. Stevens was actually really great in this game, 4 for 4 off the tee, also scored a try, but unfortunately not enough for NOLA to get the win, but definitely not enough to drop them into the number 13 spot, so they stay at number 12. Another team that has struggled tremendously this season, number 11, the Utah Warriors, who have suffered another loss. This time against a really good team, the New England Free Jacks, arguably the team with the best record in Major League Rugby. Not necessarily the best in the power rankings, but still a very, very good team. Utah Warriors, again, just not looking like the team that a lot of us, including myself, predicted they would be after a pretty good 2021 season. They have floundered quite a bit in 2022. They still have been struggling with the change in head coach for Utah. They try to have a comeback. Utah has been known as the comeback kids, the cardio kids. They tried this again with New England. Unfortunately, New England pretty much shut the door on them in the second half of the game. They lose 17-33 to New England. Old Glory DC were on a bye, so they get to stay at the number 10 spot. Number 9 is another team that's, even though their record, they're still in the playoff hunt, they've been kind of suffering quite a bit. This is their first win after, I believe, they've been on a 3-game losing streak. But the San Diego Legion bounced back with a win. Again, it's against the Dallas Jackals, so how big of a win can that be? But they did pound the Dallas Jackals 53-14. So they get the win, again, because it was the Dallas Jackals. And again, your strength of your opponent does matter in the power rankings, so they don't move a spot. They stay at number... Actually, I'm sorry. They did move one spot. They moved up to number 9, but they didn't move a lot, even though they really destroyed the Dallas Jackals 53-14. Staying at a spot, even though they did lose, but it was a pretty good game, are your 2-time MLR champions, the Seattle Seawolves. They are at number 8. Another team that is competing for one of those 3 playoff spots. The Seattle Seawolves had a pretty competitive game against the Austin Gilgronis, the number 1 team in the Western Conference, making the game much closer than it should have been. Actually, Seattle looked like the better team. They just made a lot of mistakes, especially a lot of lineout mistakes. Their defense is what kept them really in the game. That Seattle seawall was in effect. Austin was only able to score 17 points, 14 in the first half, and then got pretty much shut out in the second half. Unfortunately, Seattle really couldn't do much in the second half themselves, only scoring 6 points, 2 penalty kicks. AJ Alatimu, not exactly as efficient as he usually is off the tee, but again, really, Seattle needed more than just penalty kicks to be competitive in this game. So they go down to Austin 6-17. But because, again, it was a pretty valiant effort, they get to stay at the number 8 spot. Another really good effort, but still, again, not enough to move them a spot. You have Rugby New York at number 7. Now, the reason I say not enough to really move them up a spot, they were playing against NOLA, and after being up 31-7 in the first half, they allowed NOLA to score 3 straight tries, unanswered tries, in the second half, making the game much, much closer than it should have been, 28-36. It is a win, but because it was almost barely a win against a very low-ranking team, I didn't feel that Rugby New York should move up any position. I don't feel they should move down. Unless you're in the very top, I don't feel a win should mean you move down. If anything, you should probably just stay where you are. So he kept Rugby New York at number 7. The next 2 teams were all on bye. So the Toronto Arrows stay at number 6. And the Houston SaberCats, who are also competing for one of those 3 top playoff spots in the West, stay at number 5. Just like with my philosophy is if you win, you really shouldn't go down. I don't feel by you should necessarily move up or down unless there's a really big reason, like somebody from the top really falls down or somebody from the bottom really wins up really big. Now, we get to the top 4, and this is where the last couple weeks has been very, very boring. The top 4 stayed the top 4, but there was a huge game between the number 1 and the number 4 place team that had some huge ramifications in the rankings. And let it be known, I don't hide the fact that I am a homer for my home team, your reigning and defending LA Giltinis. But I'll admit, I really, really, really did struggle with figuring out where to place LA and where to place Rugby ATL after their encounter in week number 13. Also, too, what happened between the 2 middle teams really did take an effect. Again, all of this kind of works together, but I truly, truly believe that the winner of that game deserved to be in the number 1 spot. They really did look like the number 1 team. So, going a little bit out of order here, I'm not going to reveal 1 and 4 just yet. I'm going to stick with skipping 4 going straight to 2-3. So because of the movement in 1-4, you had some movement between 2-3. The Austin Gilgronis, your number 1 team in the West, who was number 4, moved up to number 3. And Austin struggled with Seattle. As I mentioned before, Seattle actually came off looking better in this game than maybe they should have. But, because again of what happened with the 1-4 team, basically allowed Austin to move up a spot. And then, of course, you have another team that moved up a spot. The New England Free Jacks went up. They are your number 1 team overall record-wise. They did struggle with some of their wins, which is why they kind of were a little bit lower, and they're not the number 1 team, or at least not yet. They did beat Utah pretty handily, though Utah, again, not necessarily one of the better teams. But congratulations to the New England Free Jacks. They did break an MLR record, 8 straight wins, most consecutive victories by any MLR team, so that is very impressive. They did beat Utah 33-17, so that is kind of impressive too. But again, it's Utah. No offense to Utah, but not necessarily a very tough team. Now, number 1-4, Atlanta and LA. A rematch of last year's MLR championship. There is some drama going into this game, of course, because I am a huge LA fan. I pay more attention to what's going on with the LA team. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before last week, where there was a lot of concern, Coach Renee Ie, who is technically our 4th string fly half, unfortunately was caught punching a Houston player during the Houston game in week number 12. He was given a 3-game suspension. So that really gives LA a pretty much puts them in a bind, because now who's going to play fly half? There was rumor and talk that maybe former England captains of the England Sevens rugby team, Tom Mitchell, would move to fly half. Instead, he became a winger. And, it looked like Luke Burton, technically our 3rd string fly half, who actually, in my opinion, I'm no rugby expert, in my opinion, looks much better as a center or winger, was going to start at the number 10 position. Lo and behold, literally minutes before the game started, it was announced that Harrison Goddard, who is an amazing scrum half at number 9, was going to start at number 10 for the first time in his MLR career. And he was also going to do the kicking duties, which he's never done before. There was a shaky decision made by LA, but in the end, LA made the right choice. And what a performance by your reigning, defending MLR champions, as the LA Guillotines defeated Rugby ATL 31-19 in the Snake Pit at Silverback Stadium, which makes it actually pretty more impressive of a win. It was an interesting game, to be honest. Felt this game, as everybody else I'm sure felt, was going to be a lot more competitive. LA, right off the start, coming off hot. 4 tries in the first half, 26-point lead. What was going on? Unfortunately, in the second half, things kind of started unraveling a bit, made the game a lot more interesting. There was a very, very bad elbow to the face caused by Honko Hermesheis for the LA Guillotines, which resulted in a red card. And, I love Honko, new acquisition for LA from Rugby New York, nicknamed the Terminator, because he is that cool, calm, destructive powerhouse. He is 2nd in MLR right now for most tries in the season with 7, most tries on the LA Guillotine team. And yet, this game was very, very chippy. There was a lot going on between both sides. And in the end, blatant elbow as Honko was getting up off the ground. He elbowed an Atlanta player in the face, caught right on the TMO. So he was thrown out of the game, red card. That gave Atlanta a 1-man advantage going into the 50-minute mark, I believe. And then, unfortunately, there was a questionable yellow card, given to LA, which gave Atlanta a two-man advantage. But fortunately, LA was able to use their strong defense to keep Atlanta to minimal points. I believe they only scored 2 tries at that point. So it was a little scary, but man, I've always mentioned that LA's defense doesn't get nearly as much credit as their offense, but that defense struck hard. And we talk about the Seattle Seawall, but man, the LA wall was amazing. And again, big win for LA. Big win in the Snake Pit at Atlanta. LA has not been good playing away. The last time they played Atlanta in Atlanta, LA lost. So, there was a little bit of fear from even those faithful LA fans that LA would not win. But in the end, they pulled it off. It was a great performance, albeit the second half, but due to cards. But I felt, again, LA was the better team and deserved to move up to the number 1 spot. So I know a lot of people are going to chime in, and there's going to be a lot of hates, but I truly, truly believe for right now, LA is the better team. Now, next week's games are going to be interesting because LA still has another big test up, and that's going to go against their Gillies brother or sister, however you want to call it, the Austin Gilgronis, and what has been now dubbed the first ever Gilly Cup. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Also, it will be kind of interesting to see how long the Gilly Cup lasts, considering the rumor is the Austin Gilgronis will be sold at the end of the season. More likely, they will not keep the Gilgronis name. But again, huge game next week between the 1 and 3. I'll go more into that in my next video as I preview the games. So for sure, there's going to be probably some more shaking up between these top 4 spots. But that is my power rankings after week 13. Not a whole lot of movement here, but definitely some big movement at the top. And again, it kind of does play out. You have the teams that are pretty much in the playoff position. LA, Austin have kind of pretty much locked up 1 and 2. Free Jacks and Atlanta are in the number 1 and 2 spot. Rugby New York is actually in the number 3 spot. Toronto is pretty far off. I don't believe they'll be able to catch up with New York, but it still comes down to New York and Atlanta, who's going to end up number 2 and who's going to end up number 3, leading to that all-important hosting of the playoff game. That number 3 spot for the Western Conference is a race between Houston, Seattle, and the Legion. Any 3 of those teams can still take it. So still, again, a lot to play for. And of course, you have these other teams that can still be spoilers. You can never tell in rugby. I don't think Dallas will win another game, but they could easily pull off an upset victory. Old Glory has started to find some fire now in the later half of the season, so they can easily be a spoiler in any of their games as well. So, as always, let me know in the comments what you think about my power rankings. And, yeah. No, that's it. Thank you as always for watching my video, and I'll see you on the pitch.